She died on a Tuesday and nobody knew her name. That's what haunted me most. Not the way her hand felt in mine during those final moments. Not the labored sound of her breathing. Not even the profound silence that followed. It was the simple, devastating fact that this woman, who had changed everything, was leaving the world as anonymously as she'd lived in it. The hospital bracelet on her wrist read only Jane Doe, a 47, and as I stood there, in that sterile room, watching the nurses move with practiced efficiency, I realized I was probably the only person on earth who would remember her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I met her, and why a homeless woman with no name became the most important person in my life. 3 months earlier, I was exactly where I thought I'd always be, on top. At 32, I'd built a tech startup that had just been valued at $50 million. My penthouse apartment overlooked Lake Michigan. My garage housed a Tesla and a vintage Porsche. And my calendar was booked solid with meetings, galas, and networking events that I'd convinced myself mattered. I'd worked 80-hour weeks for 7 years straight, sacrificed relationships, missed my sister's wedding, skipped my father's funeral because of a critical investor meeting. I told myself it was all worth it. Success was the only thing that mattered, the only thing that proved I was somebody. That November morning started like any other. I was running late for a breakfast meeting with potential investors, rushing down Michigan Avenue with my phone glued to my ear, barely noticing the biting wind or the people hurrying past. That's when I saw her, or rather when I nearly trampled her. She was sitting against the wall of a closed storefront, wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing, a threadbare blanket pulled around her shoulders. Her shopping cart, loaded with bags and what looked like her entire life, was parked beside her. I'd passed dozens of homeless people on that street before, always looking away, always too busy, always telling myself that my taxes paid for shelters and that it wasn't my responsibility. But something made me stop that day. Maybe it was the way she was, smiling, genuinely smiling at a small child, walking past with her mother. Maybe it was the cardboard sign propped against her cart that read, "Not asking for money, just hoping you have a beautiful day." Or maybe it was the fact that I almost kicked over the paper cup beside her, the one with exactly 3/4 in it. "I'm so sorry," I said, steadying myself. "I didn't see you." She looked up at me with eyes that were startlingly clear, almost luminous despite the weathered face surrounding them. "Nobody ever does," she said, and she wasn't being bitter, just honest. "But you stopped. That's something." I should have walked away. I was already 10 minutes late. The investors were waiting, but instead I heard myself asking, "Have you eaten today?" Her smile deepened. "Yesterday's donuts from the bakery. Still good." Something twisted in my chest. I'd spent $200 on dinner the night before and barely touched my food. "Wait here," I said, and before I could think better of it, I ducked into the Starbucks on the corner. I emerged 10 minutes later with 2 breakfast sandwiches, a large coffee, and a bag of fruit. The look on her face when I handed it to her, pure, unfiltered gratitude, made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't name. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." "But why?" "I don't know," I admitted. And I didn't. "What's your name?" "Does it matter?" she asked, unwrapping the sandwich with hands that trembled slightly. "Of course it matters." She studied me for a long moment, then shook her head. "I'll tell you what. You come back tomorrow and I'll tell you my name, but only if you actually come back. Most people don't." I didn't come back the next day, or the day after. I told myself I was too busy, that one good deed was enough, that I'd done my part. But her face kept appearing in my mind during meetings, her words echoing when I lay awake at night in my expensive sheets. Nobody ever does. A week later, I returned. I told myself it was because I happened to be in the area, but I'd actually rerouted my entire morning to walk down that street. She was there, in the same spot, and her face lit up when she saw me. "You came back," she said, and the joy in her voice made me ashamed of the week I'd let pass. "I promised," I said, though we both knew I'd broken that promise by 6 days. "Sarah," she said. "My name is Sarah." That was the beginning. I started stopping by every morning, bringing breakfast, coffee, sometimes lunch. We'd talk, really talk, in a way I hadn't talked to anyone in years. Sarah told me about her life in pieces, never asking for pity, always finding something to marvel at or laugh about. She'd been a teacher once, married with 2 kids. Then her husband died in a car accident, medical bills piled up. She lost her job during the recession, and a series of terrible, luck and worse decisions had landed. Her on the street 5 years ago. Her children had moved away, changed their numbers. She hadn't spoken to them in 3 years. "Don't you hate them?" I asked once. "Don't you hate everyone who just walks past you every day?" "Hate takes too much energy," she said simply. And anyway, most people are fighting their own battles. I learned that when I was teaching. The angry kid usually has something terrible happening at home. The parent who seems cold is usually just overwhelmed. Everyone's carrying something heavy. The world doesn't need more hate. It needs more understanding. Her words were so simple, so obvious, yet they hit me like a revelation. I thought about all the people I'd dismissed, all the employees I'd snapped at, all the weak people I'd looked down on because they hadn't achieved what I had. I thought about my sister, whose wedding I'd missed, and how I'd told her that entrepreneurship required sacrifice, as if that explained everything. I thought about my dad, who'd wanted nothing more than for me to visit one last time, and how I'd prioritized strangers in suits over the man who'd taught me to ride a bike. "I'm not a good person, Sarah," I said one morning. Surprised by the crack in my own voice, she wrapped her cold fingers around her coffee cup and looked at me with those clear eyes. "That's the thing about goodness," she said. "It's not what you've been. It's what you choose to do right now in this moment, and then the next moment. And the next, you're here, aren't you? That's a choice. That's something." I started making different choices, small ones at first, actually looking at people, learning my employees' names, asking how they were and meaning it. I called my sister, apologized, and flew out to have dinner with her family. I visited my dad's grave and stood there crying for an hour, finally letting myself grieve. I began volunteering at a soup kitchen on weekends. Sarah's wisdom, born from loss and hardship, was teaching me what 7 years of success never had. That humanity isn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in moments of connection, in choosing kindness when it costs you something. Then came January, and Sarah caught a cold that wouldn't go away. I begged her to go to a hospital, but she refused. No insurance, no ID, and a deep distrust of systems that had failed her before. I brought her medicine, extra blankets, offered to pay for a hotel room. She wouldn't take it. "Save your money for someone who needs it more," she said. Even as she shivered under her layers, the cold became pneumonia. I found her one morning barely conscious, and this time I didn't ask permission. I called 911 and rode with her in the ambulance, holding her hand, telling her she'd be fine, even though I could see the EMT's worried faces. She wasn't fine. The pneumonia had spread. Her immune system, weakened by years of exposure and poor nutrition, couldn't fight it. The doctors did what they could, but her body was shutting down. And because she had no identification, no next of kin they could locate, no records at all, she remained Jane Doe number 47 on all the hospital paperwork. I spent 3 days at her bedside. I held her hand, read to her, told her stories about how she'd changed my life, how she'd taught me to be human again. On the 3rd night, as machines beeped and hospital staff moved quietly in the halls, she opened her eyes and looked at me. "You're a good person," she whispered. "You always were. You just forgot for a while. Because of you," I said, tears streaming down my face. "You reminded me." She smiled, that same beautiful smile I'd seen that first morning. "Then I mattered," she said. "I mattered to someone." "You mattered to me," I told her. "You'll always matter." She died an hour later peacefully, her hand in mine. The funeral was small, just me, a chaplain, and 2 nurses who'd cared for her. I paid for everything, bought her a plot with a real headstone. It reads, "Sarah, teacher, friend, light in the darkness." I added the dates I knew, the day I met her and the day she died. The rest of her history might be lost, but these months would be remembered. But the story doesn't end there, because Sarah's death wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. I sold my company. Not all of it, but enough to step back, enough to make time for what mattered. I used the money to start a foundation in her name, providing housing, medical care, and job training for homeless individuals. I work there every day now, and I know every person's name, every story, every dream. Last week, we housed our 100th person. Maria, a woman who'd been sleeping in her car with her 2 kids, cried when we handed her the keys to her apartment. "Why are you doing this?" she asked me. The same question Sarah had asked that first morning. I thought about Sarah, about her smile, about the way she'd seen goodness in me when I couldn't see it myself. "Because someone once taught me that we're all carrying something heavy," I said. "And sometimes, the most important thing we can do is help someone else carry their load for a while." I think about Sarah every single day. I think about how a woman the world overlooked changed. Everything for someone the world admired. I think about how she died with almost nothing but gave me everything that mattered. I think about her sign. Not asking for money, just hoping you have a beautiful day. And now every morning, I try to give someone else what she gave me, the reminder that they matter, that they're seen, that one moment of kindness can change the course of a life. She died on a Tuesday and nobody knew her name. But I did. And because I did, hundreds of others now have a chance to be known too, to be seen, to matter. Sarah taught me that titles and achievements don't make you somebody. Kindness does. Compassion does. Choosing again and again to see the humanity in others. That's what makes you somebody worth being. That's what made her somebody. That's what made her everything.